Mystery shrouds the early history of Britain, where myth and legend blend seamlessly with truth. Among its most enduring figures stand the enigmatic Druids and the legendary King Arthur. The Druids, remembered as priests, philosophers, and keepers of sacred knowledge, guided Celtic tribes with rituals, astronomy, and oral traditions. Their presence evoked awe and fear, leaving lasting echoes in Britain's folklore. At the same time, King Arthur emerged in stories as the noble warrior king, defending his realm against chaos. His legend, infused with magic and prophecy, resonated far beyond Britain's borders. These two forces, the spiritual wisdom of Druids and the valor of Arthur, intersect in fascinating ways, forming a cultural tapestry that continues to inspire fascination, scholarship, and creative storytelling. But who were the Druids really? Were they healers, astronomers, and judges, or shadowy figures practicing rituals too mysterious for Roman chroniclers to fully capture? Their legacy resists simple answers. And what of Arthur? Was he a historical war leader, a composite of Celtic chieftains, or a figure born purely from the realm of imagination? The debate endures. Legends tell of Arthur's companions, the Knights of the Round Table, the magical sword Excalibur, and the wizard Merlin. These symbols carry whispers of Druidic lore and ancient traditions. Merlin especially embodies this blend, part prophet, part magician, and part sage. Many scholars see him as a literary echo of the Druidic seer, guiding kings through wisdom and mystery. The Romans wrote of Druids with suspicion, portraying them as both learned philosophers and dangerous enemies. Their suppression only deepened the aura of secrecy surrounding their practices. Later, Christian chroniclers reshaped the stories, weaving Druidic echoes into Arthurian legends. The line between myth and faith blurred, creating narratives of prophecy, destiny, and the eternal battle between light and darkness. As medieval poets like Geoffrey of Monmouth retold Arthur's story, the figure of Merlin gained prominence, bringing with him fragments of Druidic mysticism into chivalric romance and Christian allegory. Arthur's Britain became more than just history. It became a stage where Druids, knights, and kings symbolized timeless struggles between knowledge and ignorance, unity and division, faith and doubt. In this world, sacred groves became enchanted forests, Druidic wisdom transformed into Merlin's prophecies, and tribal chieftains grew into legendary kings defending their people with divine purpose. The enduring fascination with Druids and Arthur reflects humanity's desire for heroes guided by wisdom. Their union symbolizes a bridge between ancient spirituality and the quest for noble leadership. From Stonehenge's standing stones to Glastonbury's myths of Avalon, the physical landscape of Britain seems to breathe with echoes of Druidic rituals and Arthurian legends intertwined across centuries. Even today, Arthur's sword and Merlin's spells inspire novels, films, and music. The Druid's spiritual aura lingers, evoking curiosity about the hidden truths buried beneath myth and storytelling. Together, these traditions tell us less about factual history and more about humanity's longing for meaning, wisdom, and enduring symbols of hope in times of uncertainty. The Druids remind us of ancient knowledge deeply tied to nature, while Arthur embodies courage and justice. Their shared legend speaks to values that remain powerful in every age. As we journey into their world, we step into a realm where myth meets memory, where truth and imagination merge, and where Britain's past becomes a story for the ages. This is the tale of Druids and King Arthur, a story not just of history, but of humanity's eternal quest for wisdom, leadership, and meaning in a mysterious world. The Druids occupied a central role in Celtic society, revered as spiritual leaders, judges, and guardians of wisdom. They shaped belief, culture, and law, leaving a legacy that fascinates historians today. Unlike kings and warriors, Druids held no armies or weapons. Their influence came through knowledge of nature, astronomy, medicine, and oral tradition. In this, they commanded unparalleled respect. Druidic authority was deeply spiritual, rooted in sacred rituals and ceremonies, performed in forests, fields, and stone circles. The natural world was their temple, and they read meaning in its rhythms. They were more than priests. Druids were teachers, poets, and philosophers. They preserved tribal law and resolved disputes, ensuring that justice and tradition were passed down through generations. Because Druids passed their knowledge orally, very little was ever written down. This secrecy protected their wisdom, but also allowed mystery and myth to grow around their practices. Roman writers like Julius Caesar described Druids as influential figures with vast knowledge of the cosmos, but also accused them of human sacrifice. Whether truth or propaganda, the image endures. The annual festivals celebrated by Druids, such as Samhain, Beltane, and Lughnasadh, marked the turning of seasons. These rituals reinforced community ties and aligned people's lives with the cycles of nature. Sacred groves of oak trees symbolized divine knowledge. The Druids considered oak, mistletoe, and the natural world itself to hold powerful spiritual significance, linking them to gods and unseen realms. Astronomy also shaped their practices. Druids studied the stars and the movement of celestial bodies, guiding agricultural cycles and spiritual ceremonies with an awareness of cosmic order. Medicine formed another cornerstone of Druidic wisdom. They used herbs and natural remedies to heal, blending practical knowledge with ritual, showing their dual role as both healers and mystics. In Celtic society, Druids often advised kings and chiefs, influencing political decisions through counsel. Their wisdom extended beyond religion into governance, ensuring the survival and unity of tribes. Education within the Druidic tradition was rigorous. Apprentices spent decades memorizing verses, histories, and laws, ensuring that the entire cultural and spiritual memory of their people remained intact. Poetry and storytelling held sacred value. Druids and bards used narrative to preserve history, teach morality, and inspire courage. Stories became tools for shaping collective identity and purpose. The Druids' connection to nature also reflected their belief in the interconnectedness of all life. Rivers, forests, and mountains were sacred, representing more than resources. They embodied divine presence. Even warfare was influenced by Druids. While they themselves rarely fought, Druids sometimes intervened in battles, halting conflict with ritual or commanding respect through their spiritual authority. To their communities, Druids represented order amidst chaos. They symbolized continuity, wisdom, and the preservation of traditions that held Celtic society together in a turbulent and changing world. When Christianity and Roman authority spread into Britain, Druids became targets of suppression. Their influence threatened new rulers, and many practices were banned or discredited by outside powers. Yet, despite suppression, echoes of Druidic tradition survived. Folk customs, seasonal festivals, and mythic tales retained traces of their influence, ensuring that their wisdom was never fully erased. The most famous remnants include sites like Stonehenge, often linked with Druidic ritual. Though not built by Druids, such monuments became symbols of their mysterious spiritual heritage. Stories of Merlin, Arthur's legendary advisor, also carry echoes of Druidic archetypes: a sage, prophet, and magician guiding kings with wisdom rooted in ancient traditions of nature and magic. The Romans' descriptions, though biased, reveal how deeply feared and respected the Druids were. To conquer the Celts, Rome had to first undermine the Druids' spiritual and cultural power. Christian monks later reframed Druidic traditions through Christian allegory. Instead of priests of nature, Druids became wizards and sorcerers in folklore, blending old wisdom into new storytelling traditions. The secrecy surrounding the Druids adds to their allure. Without written records, their practices remain half-hidden, leaving room for interpretation, speculation, and imaginative retellings throughout history. The Druids' sacred knowledge was the lifeblood of Celtic spirituality. It bound communities together through ritual, symbol, and shared reverence for the unseen forces that govern nature and human life. Their rituals were performed outdoors, often in sacred groves. These natural spaces acted as living temples, where the Druids connected with gods, spirits, and ancestors through ceremony and prayer. The oak tree held particular significance, symbolizing strength, endurance, and divine knowledge. Mistletoe, gathered from oaks with golden sickles, was considered a sacred plant, possessing healing and protective powers. Rituals were closely tied to the cycles of nature. Druids honored solstices, equinoxes, and seasonal transitions, aligning human activity with the rhythm of the sun, moon, and stars. The festival of Samhain, marking the end of harvest, symbolized the thinning veil between the living and the dead. Rituals invoked protection, remembrance, and guidance from ancestral spirits. At Beltane, fires were lit to ensure fertility and protection for crops and livestock. The flames symbolized life, energy, and renewal, connecting the community with divine creative power. Imbolc, dedicated to the goddess Brigid, celebrated the return of light after winter. Rituals included purification, blessings, and offerings, symbolizing hope, fertility, and the promise of new beginnings. Lugnasad marked the first harvest, honoring abundance and gratitude. The Druids led feasts, games, and ceremonies that bound people together through shared celebration of the earth's gifts. Astronomy was essential in guiding rituals. Druids tracked solstices and equinoxes, recognizing celestial alignments that shaped agricultural and spiritual life. Stone circles served as ceremonial calendars and cosmic observatories. Divination was another key practice. Druids interpreted omens in natural phenomena, bird flight, animal behavior, or celestial signs, to guide decisions in warfare, justice, and daily life. Sacrifice, though controversial, played a role in Druidic ritual. While Roman sources describe human offerings, archaeological evidence often suggests symbolic or animal sacrifices were more common, emphasizing sacred exchange. Fire was a powerful ritual element. Sacred flames symbolized purification, transformation, and divine presence, often lit during ceremonies to connect worshippers with higher realms and protective spiritual energies. Water, too, was revered as sacred. Rivers, springs, and lakes were believed to be portals to other worlds. Offerings of weapons, jewelry, and treasures were cast into these waters. Chanting, poetry, and song accompanied rituals. Spoken word held magical power, shaping reality through incantation, blessing, and invocation, reflecting the Druids' mastery of memory, language, and symbolic expression. Ceremonies often began with purification, washing, fasting, or burning herbs to cleanse the body and spirit. Purity was essential for approaching gods and spirits with respect and openness. Initiations into deeper mysteries were shrouded in secrecy. Apprentices underwent decades of learning before being entrusted with sacred knowledge, ensuring continuity while preserving the power of hidden wisdom. Rituals also reinforced law and order. Oaths sworn before Druids carried immense weight, binding individuals spiritually and socially, with the threat of divine punishment for breaking promises. Ritual feasts were communal acts of unity. Sharing food and drink symbolized abundance, trust, and solidarity, ensuring that the bonds of community extended beyond ordinary life into the sacred. Sacred symbols, such as spirals, knots, and circles, appeared in ritual art. These represented eternity, unity, and the interconnectedness of life, echoing cosmic principles observed in nature and the stars. Weapons and tools were ritually broken before offering, symbolizing surrender to divine will. Such acts reinforced the belief that material objects held spiritual significance beyond practical use. Healing rituals combined herbal remedies with spiritual invocation. Illness was seen not only as physical, but also spiritual imbalance, requiring holistic treatment by Druidic healers through ritual and prayer. The Druids viewed dreams as messages from the divine. Dream interpretation became part of spiritual practice, revealing guidance and warnings from gods, spirits, or ancestors. Community participation was central. While Druids led rituals, everyone contributed through offerings, chanting, or symbolic acts, ensuring that spiritual life was shared, not confined to an elite priestly class. Weapons, treasures, and even crafted art were deposited in bogs and lakes as sacred offerings. These acts represented trust in divine powers and acknowledgement of life's fragile balance. Certain groves and mountains were considered portals between worlds. Rituals performed there reinforced belief in multiple realms of existence, where gods and spirits could directly influence human affairs. Sacred animals also appeared in ritual. The stag, bull, raven, and boar carried symbolic power, representing fertility, wisdom, or protection, and often featured in Druidic myths and ceremonies. Silence was equally powerful in ritual. Moments of stillness created space for divine presence, reminding participants that wisdom often emerged in quiet reflection as much as in chants. The Druids' rituals unified the Celtic world. They preserved cultural identity, offered protection, and forged spiritual resilience, ensuring that communities remained rooted in sacred tradition despite external threats. These ceremonies were more than religion. They were survival. They aligned human life with cosmic forces, offering purpose, structure, and hope in a world of uncertainty and constant change. Through sacred knowledge and ritual, the Druids forged a bridge between the earthly and the divine, shaping not only Celtic belief, but also the legendary tales of King Arthur. The story of King Arthur begins in the mists of Britain's past, where myth and history intertwine. His legend grew from oral traditions, later immortalized in medieval chronicles and romances. Arthur's roots are often tied to the post-Roman period. Britain, fractured and vulnerable, needed a unifying leader. Arthur emerged in folklore as the defender who rallied people against invading forces. The earliest mention of Arthur appears in Welsh poetry. These verses celebrated him as a warrior, fighting battles across Britain, his name invoked as a symbol of strength and unity. Historians debate Arthur's existence. Some see him as a composite figure, blending memories of multiple war leaders, while others argue he may have been a real Celtic chieftain. Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britannia, written in the 12th century, transformed Arthur from a warlord into a king, weaving myths of his birth, reign, and heroic deeds. According to Geoffrey, Arthur was born of Uther Pendragon and Igraine. His conception involved Merlin's magic, signaling his destiny as a ruler, chosen by both divine and mysterious forces. The sword in the stone legend became a defining symbol. Only Arthur, destined to rule, could draw the blade, proving his legitimacy and marking him as Britain's rightful king. Excalibur, Arthur's second sword, carried mystical power. Gifted by the Lady of the Lake, it represented divine kingship, unbreakable strength, and the sacred bond between ruler and supernatural realms. Arthur's reign was described as a golden age. He brought unity to a divided land, establishing order, justice, and hope, laying the foundation for the legendary Round Table. The Round Table symbolized equality among Arthur's knights. Each seat carried equal weight, emphasizing unity, loyalty, and shared purpose, reflecting Arthur's vision of leadership based on fairness and honor. Camelot, Arthur's fabled court, became the epicenter of chivalry, romance, and noble quests. Though likely fictional, it embodied the ideal of a kingdom rooted in justice and harmony. Arthur's knights, like Lancelot, Gawain, and Galahad, became legendary themselves. Their quests, seeking glory, serving honor, and protecting the weak, expanded the Arthurian myth into a vast landscape of medieval storytelling. The Holy Grail legend intertwined with Arthur's myth. The Grail quest symbolized spiritual purity, divine mystery, and humanity's search for transcendence, reflecting the blend of Christian symbolism and Celtic tradition. Merlin, Arthur's advisor, represented wisdom, prophecy, and magical power. His presence tied Arthur's reign to the mystical, reminding audiences that destiny and divine will guided the king's path. Arthur's battles, especially against Saxons, highlighted his role as protector. These conflicts mirrored Britain's real struggles during the early medieval period, embedding his legend within historical fears and hopes. Arthur's downfall emerged from betrayal within. Lancelot's affair with Queen Guinevere fractured trust, while Mordred, Arthur's illegitimate son, symbolized corruption, ambition, and the inevitability of internal decay. The Battle of Camlan marked Arthur's tragic end. Mortally wounded in combat against Mordred, Arthur was carried to Avalon, a mystical isle, promising his return when Britain needed him most. Avalon symbolizes hope and renewal. Arthur's departure echoed ancient myths of sleeping kings who would awaken in times of crisis, leaving his story forever open-ended and inspiring. Arthur's legend reflects timeless themes: unity, betrayal, justice, and destiny. Whether historical or mythical, his story endures as a mirror of humanity's longing for ideal leadership and noble purpose. In medieval Europe, Arthurian tales grew into sprawling romances. French writers like Chrétien de Troyes expanded the myths, weaving love, adventure, and spirituality into the fabric of Arthur's world. The Grail cycle emphasized spirituality over warfare. It portrayed Arthur's kingdom not only as a political power, but as a realm tied to sacred mysteries, elevating the myth's spiritual dimension. The Arthurian myth bridged Celtic folklore and Christian values. It combined pagan imagery, swords, lakes, sacred groves, with Christian ideals of sacrifice, purity, and divine mission, making it resonate across centuries. Arthur's legend became political propaganda. Kings of England and France invoked him to legitimize rule, claiming descent or connection, proving the myth's ability to shape real power and politics. In art and literature, Arthur's story flourished. Tapestries, manuscripts, and songs celebrated his image, immortalizing him as both a warrior king and a paragon of knightly virtue. Arthur's knights embodied ideals of chivalry, courage, and loyalty. Their quests symbolized humanity's struggles, overcoming temptation, facing betrayal, and striving for greatness, lessons that transcended medieval society and remain relevant today. Some historians suggest Arthur's myth arose from longing for stability. In turbulent times, people imagined a perfect king who restored order, reflecting deep psychological and cultural needs. Modern archaeology has sought evidence of Arthur's existence. Sites like Tintagel inspire speculation, though no conclusive proof exists. Yet the myth persists, stronger than any historical confirmation. Arthur endures because his story speaks to universal truths: the rise and fall of leaders, the fragility of trust, and the eternal hope for renewal and justice. In legend, Arthur is never truly gone. He sleeps, awaiting his return. This enduring promise keeps his story alive, shaping imagination, inspiring art, and echoing across the centuries. The rise of King Arthur, whether myth or memory, represents humanity's dream of noble leadership. His legend fuses history, magic, and morality into one of the greatest enduring tales. The Knights of King Arthur's Round Table embody some of the most enduring ideals of medieval imagination. They represented bravery, loyalty, and justice, forming a brotherhood that reflected Arthur's vision. At the heart of their fellowship stood the Round Table. Its circular design emphasized equality, eliminating hierarchy among knights, ensuring each member's voice carried weight in Arthur's court. Chivalry defined their code. It demanded knights defend the weak, uphold honor, remain loyal to their lord, and act with courtesy toward women, blending martial duty with moral responsibility. Lancelot, the most famous knight, embodied both greatness and flaw. His unmatched skill in battle contrasted with his tragic betrayal of Arthur through his love for Queen Guinevere. Gawain, Arthur's nephew, symbolized loyalty and strength. Stories often portrayed him as brave yet human, highlighting the challenges knights faced balancing duty, honor, and personal weakness. Galahad represented spiritual perfection. As Lancelot's son, he surpassed his father, becoming the purest knight. Only Galahad achieved the Holy Grail, embodying Christian virtue and the quest for divine truth. Percival's story reflected innocence and growth. Initially naive, his journey toward understanding the Grail symbolized humanity's learning process, highlighting that wisdom often arises through mistakes and perseverance. The Grail quests revealed the deep spiritual aspect of Arthurian knighthood. Beyond valor, knights were expected to strive for purity, aligning earthly actions with divine will and eternal reward. Yet not all knights embodied perfection. Mordred's treachery highlighted the darker side, ambition, betrayal, and greed, reminding audiences that knightly ideals were vulnerable to corruption and human failing. Chivalry was more than battlefield conduct. It shaped behavior at court, emphasizing respect, humility, and courtesy, offering a vision of society where strength served justice rather than domination. The knights' oaths became legendary, swearing to protect the innocent, serve the king, and remain true to their honor. They created an enduring template for moral responsibility. Courtly love intertwined with knighthood. Knights pledged devotion to ladies, often idealized, representing loyalty and inspiration. Yet such devotion sometimes blurred boundaries, as seen in Lancelot and Guinevere's tragic romance. The Round Table fostered unity, but human emotions often tested it. Rivalries, jealousies, and betrayals fractured brotherhood, mirroring the fragility of ideals in real societies. Knights' adventures, whether battling giants, rescuing maidens, or defending realms, symbolized humanity's struggles against chaos. These quests reflected timeless challenges, confronting fear, resisting temptation, and striving for greatness. The chivalric ideal extended beyond Arthur's court. Medieval society adopted these values as aspirational, influencing how nobles defined honor, loyalty, and justice across Europe. Yet contradictions existed. Knights were warriors, violent by necessity, yet expected to act with restraint and mercy. This tension revealed the difficulty of reconciling ideals with harsh realities of war. Arthur's knights embodied the possibility of moral leadership in turbulent times. Their code served as both an idealized vision and a cautionary tale of human imperfection. The Holy Grail legend elevated chivalry into spirituality. Knights were not only warriors, but seekers of divine truth, reminding audiences that ultimate victory was moral, not martial. the decline of Arthur's fellowship underscored fragility. Betrayal, temptation, and failure eroded unity, demonstrating how ideals, no matter how noble, can crumble under the weight of human weakness. Despite their flaws, Arthur's knights became immortal symbols. Each figure, Lancelot, Gawain, Galahad, Percival, offered lessons about loyalty, love, faith, and failure, embodying the complexity of human nature. Legends of Arthurian knighthood influenced real medieval knighthood. Codes of honor were adopted into military orders, shaping expectations for warriors across Christendom, blending myth with lived social norms. Literature amplified these stories. French romances, English chronicles, and later adaptations spread the knights' tales, embedding them into Europe's cultural memory as models of courage and tragedy. Even centuries later, Arthur's knights inspire. Their struggles with loyalty, morality, and desire reflect timeless questions of what it means to live honorably in an imperfect world. Chivalry continues to resonate. While no longer tied to warfare, its ideals of respect, service, and honor echo in modern concepts of integrity and leadership. The Round Table itself symbolizes unity amid diversity. Its circular form remains a powerful metaphor for cooperation, equality, and shared responsibility in leadership and community. Knighthood in Arthur's legend blended action and philosophy. Battles showcased valor, while quests reflected introspection, teaching that greatness required both outward strength and inner growth. The glory of King Arthur's reign was never meant to last forever. Legends describe how betrayal, ambition, and fate conspired to unravel the shining dream of Camelot. At the heart of the kingdom's decline lay human weakness. The bond between Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot, once the court's greatest strength, fractured into jealousy, guilt, and betrayal. Lancelot's love for Guinevere ignited scandal. Their secret romance, when revealed, shattered Arthur's trust. The Fellowship of the Round Table, once unshakable, split into factions of loyalty and anger. Arthur's justice demanded consequences. Guinevere was condemned, her fate sealed by law. Lancelot, once the kingdom's defender, became its enemy, rescuing her, but leaving bloodshed in his wake. The battle between Lancelot and Arthur's forces devastated Camelot. Brothers in arms turned upon each other, knights who once shared quests, now cut down in tragic, senseless conflict. The seeds of destruction had been planted long before. Prophecies foretold Arthur's fall, often linked to his illegitimate son, Mordred, whose ambition grew alongside simmering resentment. Mordred embodied betrayal. Raised within Arthur's shadow, he eventually turned against his father, seizing power during Arthur's absence and tearing apart the fragile remnants of Camelot's unity. Arthur returned to find his throne usurped. His own blood had become his greatest enemy, a symbol of destiny's cruel hand and the cycle of betrayal. The clash between Arthur and Mordred at Camlann became legendary. Father and son, king and usurper, met in a battle that embodied both personal tragedy and national ruin. The battlefield was apocalyptic. Knights fell in droves, their noble oaths consumed by chaos. Brotherhood turned to carnage, leaving the once mighty fellowship broken, littered with the fallen. Arthur slew Mordred, but not without mortal cost. Struck down by his own son, Arthur's reign ended in blood, a tragic conclusion to a kingdom built on ideals. Wounded, Arthur was carried away. Legends say he was taken to Avalon, the mystical isle, neither dead nor alive, awaiting the day he might return. Guinevere retreated into repentance. Racked by guilt for her role in the kingdom's fall, she sought solace in prayer, renouncing the courtly life she had once embodied. Lancelot, too, lived in sorrow. Once the greatest knight, he ended his days as a penitent hermit, mourning the kingdom destroyed by his divided loyalties. The Round Table, symbol of equality and brotherhood, was shattered. Its dream dissolved, reminding generations that ideals can be fragile when tested by passion and betrayal. The fall of Camelot was not simply about individuals. It reflected the impossibility of sustaining perfection in a flawed world, where human weakness often undermines even the noblest visions. Arthur's story became a warning. No leader, however just, is immune to fate or failure. Even the greatest kingdoms are vulnerable to collapse from within. Yet Arthur's end was also hopeful. Legends claimed he was not gone forever. The prophecy of his return promised renewal, making him a symbol of eternal hope. Avalon became a timeless metaphor. Was it a real place or a realm beyond death? Its mystery ensured Arthur remained suspended between myth and history. The fall of Camelot echoed real medieval anxieties: political instability, betrayal among rulers, and the fragility of unity were realities audiences knew all too well. Arthur's knights scattered into legend. Their stories survived through retellings, each version adding lessons, reshaping their failures into enduring myths of loyalty, love, betrayal, and redemption. The death of Arthur symbolized the death of an age. The dream of perfect unity passed, leaving future generations to wrestle with its meaning and promise. Some saw Arthur as a Christ-like figure, his fall and promised return, reflecting cycles of sacrifice, loss, and ultimate hope that resonated with Christian audiences of the time. The collapse of Camelot also signified the failure of chivalry. Ideals clashed with reality, showing that noble visions could not always survive ambition, passion, and betrayal. Yet, paradoxically, the failure made the legend stronger. Audiences saw in Arthur not unreachable perfection, but the tragedy of human greatness undone by flaw and fate. Stories of Camelot's fall spread across Europe. French, English, and Welsh traditions each preserved the memory, weaving Arthur's downfall into a tapestry of cultural identity and cautionary tale. Arthur's fall endures because it feels universal. Every society faces moments when ideals crumble, when leaders falter, when dreams collapse. His story reflects those timeless human struggles. The battlefield of Camlan became a symbol of endings. It was where unity dissolved, ideals died, and a kingdom's light faded, leaving only memory and legend behind. Arthur's final words, as told in some versions, urged his knights to remember the dream. Though Camelot had fallen, the ideals it represented were never fully lost. The end of Camelot reminds us that history and myth are woven from both triumph and tragedy. Greatness often carries within it the seeds of its undoing. Arthur's legend did not end with his fall. It endured precisely because of its tragedy, becoming a story that continues to inspire reflection on power, loyalty, and hope. Arthur's story did not end with his fall. Instead, his legend grew, carried forward through centuries, blending myth, history, and spiritual symbolism into enduring cultural memory. The Druids, once marginalized by Christian scribes, returned in legends as guardians of wisdom, keepers of mysteries, and quiet influences shaping Arthur's mystical identity across generations. Arthur's connection with Avalon became deeply symbolic. To many, it represented the blending of Christian salvation with older Celtic traditions, promising rebirth, renewal, and eternal return. The Druids' emphasis on cycles of nature echoed in Arthur's prophecy. He was not dead but sleeping, awaiting a time of Britain's greatest need. This promise kept hope alive during turbulent medieval centuries. When kingdoms fell or foreign powers threatened, storytellers reminded audiences Arthur would return to restore balance. The symbolism of the Round Table endured. Its design embodied equality, justice, and unity, ideals long sought but rarely achieved in medieval European society. Camelot's vision outlived its fall. Writers reimagined it as a golden age, a fleeting glimpse of perfection inspiring later generations to strive for noble ideals. Druidic influence persisted subtly. Their reverence for sacred landscapes colored the myths of Arthur's burial places, linking him eternally with hills, lakes, and groves of Britain. Arthur's knights became archetypes. Lancelot, Galahad, Gawain, and others represented virtues and flaws, making them teaching tools in sermons, romances, and chivalric codes throughout medieval Europe. The quest for the Holy Grail reflected this fusion. A Christian relic, framed within Celtic motifs, created a timeless story of spiritual striving and divine mystery. Arthurian legends became moral mirrors. Medieval audiences saw themselves in the failures and triumphs of Camelot, finding both caution and inspiration within the tales. The Druids' mystical presence gave Arthurian stories deeper resonance. Their wisdom offered a bridge between pagan spirituality and Christian symbolism, preserving ancient echoes within medieval imagination. Arthur's downfall carried lessons about unity. His inability to sustain harmony reflected real struggles of medieval rulers balancing ambition, loyalty, and fragile bonds of brotherhood. The enduring myth taught that leadership required more than strength. Wisdom, humility, and balance were essential, echoing the Druidic ideals of harmony within nature and society. By the High Middle Ages, Arthur's story became European property. French romances, English chronicles, and Welsh poetry all reshaped him, expanding his legend beyond Britain's borders. His myth unified cultures. Each retelling reflected local values, yet all retained the essence of Arthur, a just king, betrayed yet eternal, fallen yet promised to return. The Druidic undertone kept the legend mystical. Audiences sensed that Arthur's fate was more than politics. It touched cosmic cycles, divine will, and nature's eternal rhythms. Medieval pilgrims visited sites linked to Arthur. Glastonbury claimed Avalon, Stonehenge echoed Druidic power, and landscapes became charged with legendary memory, deepening his mythic geography. In the Renaissance, Arthur's story adapted again. Writers emphasized chivalry, courtly love, and moral allegory, while still preserving echoes of his mystical and Druidic roots. The Enlightenment nearly dismissed him as fiction, yet the Romantics revived Arthur, cherishing him as a symbol of national identity and lost wonder in industrial times. The Druids re-emerged too, romanticized as guardians of Britain's ancient soul. Together, Arthur and the Druids symbolized resistance against forgetting spiritual roots in a mechanized world. Today, Arthur remains a cultural icon. Films, novels, and scholarship revisit his legend, proving that the dream of Camelot and its mysteries still inspire imagination. His legacy endures, not improving history, but in shaping identity. Arthur remains a myth of possibility, a reminder of humanity's longing for justice and unity. The Druids remind us of forgotten wisdom. Their silent presence in the legends invites modern audiences to respect nature, cycles, and mysteries beyond human control. Arthur's eternal sleep in Avalon remains powerful. It suggests that even in decline, hope persists, that restoration may come when the world most needs its heroes. The fall of Camelot did not silence its ideals. Instead, it ensured their preservation, transforming tragedy into a timeless story of resilience and rebirth. In Arthur's dream, we glimpse humanity's highest aspirations: loyalty, justice, unity, and balance. Though flawed, the legend continues to challenge us to reach for something greater.